Welcome to the Untypical Parent Podcast. It's a podcast for parents in additional needs families, and I'm your host, Liz Evans. This is the place to find your reassurance that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. It's here to make the hard bits feel lighter and the good bits brighter. Just quickly before we get started, are you looking for practical ways to support a child experiencing school anxiety? This season, I'm delighted to let you know that the Untypical Parent Podcast is sponsored by Terry Wise from Wise Inclusion and Rachel Helm from Helm Education Consultancy. They are experts in inclusive education and supporting children who struggle to access school. Together, they run webinars and workshops to help parents and schools work together and improve outcomes for children experiencing emotionally based school anxiety. If you're supporting a child struggling with school attendance, check the link in the show notes to find out more about how Terry and Rachel can support you. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to the Untypical Parent Podcast. So today I've got a guest with me, Eliza Fricker, and we're going to do some talking around parenting because parenting advice out there can be loud. It can be opinionated and I think as well relentless about what we should be doing, could be doing, might be doing. Someone's always got the perfect answer to how we should be parenting. And for people that know the podcast well, they will know that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. And especially when we have children or family members that maybe are neurodivergent or additional needs, that perfect answer doesn't always fit our families. So I suppose my first question to you, Eliza, is there's a lot of noise out there about parenting, a lot of noise. And I think as parents in neurodivergent families, it becomes even louder that we should do this and should do that. How have you tuned that out?
Learning the hard way, isn't that how we all learn to tune it out? It's a culture, well, we're a consumerist culture, aren't we? You know, this is what we've set up as humans, people to buy things, and the world is now full and oversaturated with options to do that. And I think it's the same with parenting. I think people are looking for those fixes and solutions. And for us, I think we are conditioned with that because the school system itself, when you're going through it with your child and things aren't straightforward, I think school is often looking very solution and fix focused to that. And I often talk about, the simplisticness of that, oh, you've got an autistic child. Do you need headphones? Is the classroom too loud? Do you need headphones? I mean, they'd love it, wouldn't they, if it was that simple, because then they've solved it. And I always say it's not. And I think what we all learn as parents is that it's complex, isn't it? And it's multi-layered. And so we probably do learn the hard way that there isn't a kind of roadmap for this way of parenting. And I think what's quite interesting is sort of when, God, I mean, my child is nearly 18, but when, I first started finding out about autism and then pathological demand avoidance, there wasn't that much about PDA, demand avoidance at all. And now, you go on Instagram and everyone's talking about PDA. And what I've also noticed is there's become a kind of a marketing, a commercial element to that. So there's some big names out there now offering, this sort of almost looks like a shop for how to kind of deal with a PDA kid. And I've looked at some of them in detail and they cost an arm and a leg. These are an absolute fortune. And of course, parents are desperate and they're paying this money. And I looked at one and it worked out that what you were paying for, you were going to be paying for 3 sessions as a person, and it was over £300 a session. So
£300 a session.
Yeah. And there's snazzy videos and they're that. And I'm sure there's some very worthwhile content within this, but everything becomes about marketing and buying and selling. And, and I think what we learn is that our children, there is no fix. There is no clear way with this stuff. And in some ways that's quite liberating. But I guess when you're starting out on this and maybe thinking, your child doesn't fit the autism stuff, and then you look at PDA and you're like, wow, these people can help me through this. And maybe they will to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
most of it's gonna be your own instinct and going with that.
It is all about, isn't it? It's about tweaking it, isn't it, and making it
Yeah,
right, and then I think as a parent, you get down well, this is what the experts are telling me I should do, and it's not working, therefore I'm now the problem,
yeah.
or my kid is the problem.
Mm.
Then we kind of come into this, you becoming the problem or someone else becoming the
Yeah,
problem, and actually it's nothing about that. It's just you haven't found the right solution yet. You haven't found the right environment or the style or the
yeah,
whatever suits you. And, as parents, we've got our own needs. And I do a lot of talking about that, about actually our needs are really important in that as well. Because our kids don't operate as an island. You
no.
know, there's the multi-layered systemic thing called a family, and nobody's is the same. Even those that think they've got a typical family, when you go in, I remember as a kid going in and meeting other people's families and going, "Oh, we don't do that in our family."
Yeah, I remember that too, yeah, going in there for dinner and it'd be an eye-opener, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, even just by things they'll put on the table and how they'll serve something.
Yeah.
We don't do that. So then it's very quick to reflect it back on ourselves that we somehow then have become a failure as a parent.
Mm. Yeah.
I suppose in the early days for you, when you were kind of going through all this and discovering what was going on, and was was that really loud in your head that you were somehow failing, or have you always been kind of like, no, we're going to find our way through this, and I know,
No, in the
yeah,
beginning,
okay,
no way. And, you constantly question it, I think, I hope, I would say it certainly gets quieter, that stuff, but in the beginning, it's completely, I think there's a lot more information out there, which can be a great thing, or it can also, be more pressure and whatever. But, when I started out on this, I didn't know anything about children who struggled with school. I didn't know really much about autism. We're talking kind of 16 plus years ago. So, that stuff wasn't readily available. So it totally felt like it was, yeah, on me really, particularly when going through the school system for sure, because, they never said to me there's other kids that struggle with school. There was never a coffee morning for families like mine. It was all very much, the focus was on sort of improving parenting and stuff, and sort of, um, reducing your anxiety. And, it's very much the pushback, which I call it,
yeah,
on
yeah,
it. And I think that sort of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. And I think what happens then is you lose that sort of instinct. So your instinct with your own child gets quieter because other voices get louder. And that's why I don't think it's necessarily all about, these solutions. It's about kind of, um, really for parents to kind of get more back in touch with themselves and their instinct. Because, like you said, if we're all from different environments and cultures, and that's okay and that's a good thing. So doing it in a way that works for you is so important to that.
yeah,
It's like when parents say, how long is, my child going to have this break, till they recover from their breakdown or burnout? Well, it's completely different, isn't it, for everyone, because all of our cultures and environments are completely different. So those sort of things are very difficult to answer, and I understand why people want those answers, because it's frightening, isn't it? And we're unsure. And
really scary. And I think even when I think back to, when my kids were young, and I remember, the health visitors coming around, and I'm wanting an answer. How do I do this? My one particularly was,
I bet it was, how do I get more sleep? Probably.
that was exactly it, yeah. Exactly. What do I do to make them sleep better? And I just wanted this answer. And like you say, it's really scary and frustrating and annoying at times when you just think, why can't someone just tell me, if you do this, then this will happen?
Yeah.
But like you say, it's not until we kind of look much deeper. It's never, ever that simple.
No.
It's so complex. It's so layered. And that goes into our parenting. It goes into kids managing in school, everything. And
Yeah.
that can be really, really annoying as a parent.
Be, because there's a lot of books and whatever's out there telling you that there is a formula to this stuff,
Yes.
isn't there?
Yeah.
You put your baby down, and, you sleep train them and they'll learn to go to sleep. And, many of us who have neurodivergent children learn early on, well, my child will never be put down, it will just go to sleep. They're my little koala that I have to carry around all
Yes.
the time. But, that stuff makes us feel inadequate. Those seeds of inadequacy, if you like, are sowed really early on, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really early on. I think it's interesting when you talked about instinct then. I think, for me, I felt like I always have felt like I had quite a strong instinct to begin with. But like you say, as I went through my parenting and things became more difficult, my instinct got squashed more and more and more and more and more. And I look back now and think, you know, I know you've probably had similar challenges as well, is that when my son was really struggling to go to school, I was still pushing. And hindsight's a wonderful thing. And there was a lot of stuff caught up in that. And I, was sending him in when I should never, ever have sent him in. And I vowed I will never do that again. I've learned. Um, but that instinct in me was there, but I wasn't listening to it. I was listening to other people around me. I was listening to, you've got to get your kids in school. I was terrified I was going to go to prison. Well, it got really catastrophic in my head about what was happening. If I didn't send my child to school, I was going to go to prison. And then what was going to happen? I'm a solo parent. I was going to look after my kids. And it had gone, whoa.
Yeah.
And that instinct had, all of that got squashed down. And I followed you've got to get him into school. Did you have something similar for you? Is that what kind of?
Absolutely that. And I do hear real horror stories from families about the pressure that comes from school. And I don't think there was an enormous actual pressure from school itself. They weren't, I don't remember them sort of saying, well, you're going to get fined, or I don't remember there being conversations like that. But I think that conditioning, if you like, was there. So
Yeah.
I had that in me anyway, that, I think there's a lot of sort of red top headlines that sort of all had in, previous years, parents in pajamas, didn't they? Sort of,
Yes.
feckless parenting, parents in pajamas, sort of not bothering to take their children into school. I don't know where it comes from. It all filters through this stuff, doesn't it? So I certainly had that pressure on myself, not necessarily directly being communicated that from school, but every child goes to school, don't they? And they turn up on time and they had their teeth brushed and they've had a good night's sleep and they probably went to bed on a balanced meal of vegetables, all these things that I was not able to achieve. So you feel like you're quite a rubbish parent all round.
Yeah, yeah. And is that what kind of led you to doing the writing side of stuff that you do and the illustrations that you do? Is that where that came from, or has that always been there for you?
I've always been an illustrator. I've always done that. It's always been, I mean, that was my favourite subject at school, was art. I've always drawn. My dad was a political cartoonist. It's my culture kind of thing is
Yeah.
around that. But I was a designer, so I was designing wallpapers. And as my child was struggling more with school, I just couldn't keep up with it. It was a real struggle. I was trying to, but my head wasn't there. And it was only when she stopped being able to go to school that I was drawing those experiences, because I still remember the last meetings I had to go, which were these transition to secondary school meetings, and it was like a 6-week course. Parents like mine with children who now I know were not likely to be able to go to secondary school,
Yeah.
we're all put in this room and we were having to sort of, I don't know, they were sort of prepping us for secondary school. We just need to give them a map and they'll be fine, they'll find their way around. And I remember we were all sitting there, and there's someone that was in that meeting that I'm actually friends with now. Honestly, I look around this room and I'm sure most of us were in these chairs sort of slumped like this, and we were being told this sort of information that I think we just all thought, this is not going to work. We just felt really done in with it, and I sat in these meetings and I thought, I think it's just absolutely surreal. I think we get to this place and this is just absolutely bonkers. And I just thought, one day I'm going to draw this stuff and show how ridiculous it is. And I think that was kind of the early drawings were obviously processing the stuff, but also there was kind of a lot of rage in the beginning with it. But also the ridiculous, I just thought this is absolutely ridiculous what families go through. And it kind of felt like, you know, professionals by that point didn't know what to do with any of us, these poor
Yes.
families told to throw a ball into a waste paper basket and say how we felt that day. They just well, they were like they were done with us. They didn't know what to do, you know? And I thought I've got to draw all this stuff, I've got to show
Yeah.
what it's actually really like. And
It kind of
and I
started off
think
as a way of
this
you processing stuff almost.
absolutely, to process it. I've just read, and I've forgotten her name, Rachel, a young girl that's just written a book for Jessica Kingsley about her anorexia experiences. And she says in there, we don't, as autistic neurodivergent people, we don't often process things till off, we don't process it in that moment. So for me, definitely that is a way of processing stuff. But it was also to sort of take a bit of ownership back because that narrative became other people's. We were just, I got some of that paperwork back. It was awful that was written about us. And I just thought, no, I'm going to take that back. This is who we are. And this stuff is actually nonsense, a lot of it.
Yeah. So when did the writing come in there? So obviously you started as the illustrator.
Uh,
And did the illustrating then lead on to be thinking, I'm going to put a book together with it?
I think the earliest bit, I think I was sort of putting the stuff for Can't Not Won't together. But I was actually contacted by a publisher to write the family experience of PDA, and I was like, wow, I don't even know if I can do this. I mean, I read a hell of a lot of books, but I don't know if I can write a book. But yeah, it just kind of took off from there, really. And I suppose, it's all the stuff I have always been doing, have always been drawing, reading, writing, but it was just that it came together at this point. And yeah, it kind of came from there, really. And I suppose that was the family experience PDA. I think the illustrations remove a bit of that kind of how to do things of traditional
Yeah.
parenting, and it's a sort of gentler explanation of how those things might look rather than sort of telling people what to do, because I think we've had enough of that as parents.
And I think, yeah, definitely. I think that's really nice as well. It kind of, even for me as a dyslexic person, I find it, seeing your drawings tells a story where I don't have to do a lot of reading.
Yeah,
I'm often read the beginning of a book and then I just skip to the end because I
yeah,
just want to know whether it's worth the effort. And I think and what I love about your drawings is there's a story within the drawing. I can see what it is. I don't have to always read the text either side of
yeah.
that. I can see in the drawing what you're trying to say.
And I think I was aware of that. Parents,
Yeah.
don't have much time, might be
Yes.
neurodivergent themselves. I mean, I've got a ton of books to read that are sort of non-fiction books, and I was looking through them last night to read one, and some of them I'm just like, this is such a great and important subject, but the text is tiny and it's tons to read. And really, am I going to get around to reading it? No, I'm
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
I'm all
Oh,
for an illustrated
yeah.
version of things.
But I think that's great 'cause I think as we get older, we move away from picture books because those are for kids, the picture books, and those of us who can't read. But actually, I think pictures tell 1,000
Yeah,
words, and you can create all sorts of stuff around it. And I think for me, I think it's missing. I'd
yeah.
bring way more pictures back into books, even as adults
I
to
speak
kind of
to loads of academics, professionals, and I'm always saying to them, whenever we have a meeting, I'm always like, if you ever want to do an illustrated version of this,
yeah,
I'll do it, because there's so much good content out there that I just can't get my head around because, like I said, it's
yes,
text heavy and it's
yes,
boring. And I think that is also a neurodivergent thing, because the amount of things I've been on, like talks or training, and the slides are so, to me, and this isn't a sort of snobby thing or anything like that. I think it is a sensory thing. I see these slides and I could almost weep because I can't look at them because visually they're dreadful. And I think that's lost me already. So for me, that engagement comes as a visual communicator from something that looks
yeah, yeah.
interesting and nice to look at,
It's
really.
funny that, isn't it? Because I think when I do my presentations, people often go to me, "Well, yours are very different," and it's often because it's a picture for me, because
There
it
you
will
go. So
trigger
we're
off
talking of a
for
similar,
how I will then talk. And I'll have
yeah,
a few kind of bullet points to me, but what I'm trying to do is pull people into the picture to make
yeah.
them feel something. to
Yeah.
then have the conversation rather than, I used to, when I look back, when I would do presentation with all these bullet points
Yeah.
and I'd read through them. And I remember somebody saying to me once, I can read. I don't need that up. I want you to hear me talk. It was quite brutal, the feedback, but
Yeah.
I took it on board. And I thought, actually, what am I doing? Actually, the pictures are so important. And I'm
Yeah,
not,
and people are coming to hear you. That's the thing,
yes,
aren't they? They wanna hear what you've got to
yeah,
say rather than they could go and pick a book up and read all that stuff.
yeah, absolutely. So I think the pictures are just brilliant. And I think so that's how I've really kind of got into what you do, and it's the pictures that I look at, and I get something from the pictures rather than the reading. But makes it so nice is it's accessible because
Yeah.
other people will be much more into the written word, and that will mean more to them. So
Mm.
it just makes it so more accessible for so many
Yeah,
more.
I mean, I get a lot of books to review as well, and I can see that now because I mean, I read lots and lots and lots of fiction. My mum was a librarian, that's kind of reading,
Okay.
reading, reading. But non-fiction, I really struggle to read. Like I listen to a lot of I love Radio 4 and I'll listen to sort of radio documentaries and I'll listen to audio books of non-fiction. But to read non-fiction, I find very difficult. And I get a lot to review and I find them quite difficult. And I find often that they're trying to fill a book with this stuff. So it's sort of stuff where you said you'll read the beginning and jump to the end. A lot of them you can almost do that because you almost can feel the pain of them trying to fill
Yes.
however many pages to get a book out of this. And I think, you could have stuck a few pictures in and you'd have been all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With the books that you've written, have you had to has it helped you kind of unlearn things that you've thought that you were maybe doing as a parent that you've had to unlearn along the way, and maybe the books have helped you do that?
Yeah, because I suppose that's that, like you were saying, that processing element, isn't it? Because it sort of allows you to kind of consider other things. I think what it's brought is I'm really fortunate that I get to meet loads of different people as well through this work. So I talk to lots of different professionals. And I think obviously my parenting had sort of shifted, but I think the other thing that is really nice is that because I'm having conversations, I get to hear lots and lots of different viewpoints. And social media is not like that. Social media is you put something out there and if someone doesn't like it, they go for you, you know.
Yes.
And that's a very different way from having conversations. I think there was a newspaper years ago that used to get two different opposing people with different views and they'd have to go out to lunch. And often they'd find they could come together over things because that's what we do as humans. But social media obviously doesn't allow for that. And something I've kind of learned, and obviously it's quite difficult as well, because sometimes if you're neurodivergent and you've got a lot of trauma, you can get quite kind of, you're less flexible in your thinking. So I can see also empathetically where that comes from. But I now know multiple things can be true at once. That's life. So I think most of the work that I do, it tries to offer a door open for people to have a look rather than to ever say, this is the way and this is the right way, because there is no right way with anything in life ever. Multiple things are always true and exist alongside each other. So I think that's been a really nice thing. It kind of opens up that sort of intellectual sort of discussion and flexibility around ideas and parenting. And it's quite interesting. Sometimes I meet people where we're very different like that, but you still find something that you can kind of align on within that.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard, that, isn't it? I think that, like you say, those very strong opinions, and it does happen a lot on social media that people are put against each other almost,
Yeah.
aren't they? And I often see someone say something, and then somebody else is tagged into that.
Yeah.
Have you seen
Yeah.
this? And it's like, oh god, that's going to
Yeah.
go off. And it feels, I suppose, social media can feel quite unsafe to have those conversations because it
Definitely.
becomes,
Yeah, I'd stay off that stuff
yeah,
totally. Mm.
yeah. But actually, like you say, when you get parents in a room together, actually, don't have those kind of conversations, I often find. Those conversations are very much, "I've tried this and this really works." And someone goes, "Oh, really? That's quite interesting. I've tried that before and it doesn't." And it's kind of gone, "Yeah, okay." And
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not a
Yeah,
big
it's totally different, isn't it?
no big issue
Yeah.
about it, actually. And I do quite a lot with the parents that I work with is go get into some groups of parents, go and speak to other
Yeah.
parents. I'm not going to be the expert that's going to go to you, this is what you need to do and it's all going to be good. You've got to find that kind of safe circle. There's people that you feel really safe with, that you can go and have those conversations with and go, I tried that. Yeah, not again.
Yeah.
Or this was amazing. And someone going, well, actually, I thought it was crap.
Yeah. And also, I think, that side of it, finding those people, I always say that is so important. Find those like minded people. I mean, you might often say you don't probably get to meet up with them that much, but even if it's on sort of WhatsApp and you can chat to each other, that can be really helpful because when you are having to do it very, very differently, it is important that you find others who are also having to do it differently, like you,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we're our small wins are gonna be very, very small compared to
Yeah.
kind of traditional
Yeah.
parenting and stuff, so
How did you find those groups, Eliza? Because I suppose when I was thinking about that, when you were just talking, I was thinking that's the biggest thing that I think I felt
yeah,
when things went really wrong, and we were in mainstream school. I felt we were in the minority. There was nobody else talking about their kid couldn't get into school. I felt like I was the only one. We became very isolated as a family. He was really, really poorly with his mental health, and we didn't go out very much. And if we did, it was usually quite stressful for everybody. And we'd get looks and whatever. And I felt that's the bit that's had the biggest impact on me, is finding those people, but finding them. I didn't know where they were to begin with, I suppose. Where did you find people that you thought, "Yeah, these are my people"?
yeah, sort of all over the place. I think one I did actually meet at that parenting group, the
Yeah.
dreadful what I was saying about.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in Brighton, it's quite a small town in a way, so sort of everyone knows everyone in some there's always that sort of connection here. So, we don't meet up, but we do just get it and, leave each other voice notes or check
Yeah.
in. And yeah, just all out. I think another one was through another sort of parenting group. Laura Kirby, who you
Had on a
have had
podcast,
on
yeah.
here, we met because I actually went to her training. So years and years and years
You?
ago, I did. It was an in-person training. And I'd say I was probably, in terms of where we were at the time, I was probably on my knees. And I said to her at the end, it was only a sort of small group of parents there. But at the end, a sort of she just seemed really authentic. And I think that's what we're always looking for when we're going through this stuff. And I sort of pulled us to put one side at the end when she was sort of packing up her bag. And I said, look, we're meant to be going, starting secondary school in September. I just want, like, do you think it's going to work? PDA kid, whatever. And she said, do you want my honest answer? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, very unlikely. And I said, do you know anyone doing your tuition service? But where I live in Brighton. And she gave me some details, who I then contacted, but it was that breath of fresh air that, a professional saying, giving that's what you want, isn't it, as a parent? I don't know why they're so terrified of doing it, because we treasure those that do give us the honest feedback, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes they feel so constrained by it and, if I do this, I could get in trouble and, all this kind of stuff that it's really difficult. And I think, even I think from an OT perspective, we're it's how you professionally respond. And sometimes someone just wants a real person at the end of it, don't they? Just to go, one, are you all right?
Yeah.
Um, and two, give you that honest opinion. And a lot of the time, professionals do have an honest opinion, but they feel,
Yeah, and I think they can do it within still being a professional. I mean, we had a brilliant ed psych who was with the local authority, and he was that sort of shining light through all of this at a really difficult time. And actually, I saw him not that long ago near Christmas time at a party. Funnily enough, as Brighton is a small place,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we chat, and he's just one of those that kind of gets it and is able to still be professional, but also sort of hold that space for parents.
yeah, yeah. And do you think, and this is a question for you now, Do you think you've got it all sorted now, Eliza? Is this it now? It's all sorted.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I've got a
I've written my
special
book.
bag that says sorted.
Yeah,
No,
all sorted.
I don't think you ever have it sorted. Um, I often say I don't think you can ever take your foot off the pedal with
Yeah.
this. Um, it's probably when you do start to think you can take your foot off the pedal that it goes a bit skew-whiff again.
Yeah,
I
probably
think
actually, yeah.
yeah. I think the nature of it is it's that, isn't it? You're just the path is just a big squiggle of, that there is no clear path with it. And so it's kind of keeping that steadiness in our continuity of ourselves as much as we
Yeah,
can with this, even
yeah,
though we have complete uncertainty most of the time. I know people don't like talking about kind of grieving because they don't think that's kind of neurodivergent, or affirming or whatever. But I think we all need to grieve in our lives, whether it's, relate any relationship or, I read a really amazing thing the other day about, someone said, you've got to sit with despair at times in your life. You have to sit with despair, and I think that's really, really important, because what we have in our going on in our brains is we have this sort of protection of being fearful of feeling things. I don't want to feel utter despair ever.
yeah,
That must be awful.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
actually, if you do sit with that and you go to that place, well, you've done it, you felt it, you've been there, you've done that. And I think that is part of the process, that we almost have to go to those places in order to let go with this sort of parenting
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
And it is a very, very, very different one. We will continually be asked by people, what are they doing then? Are they doing that? How's that going? Often it will be a kind of, I don't know, or that didn't work out.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
where we sit with this
yeah,
journey
yeah,
that we're on. And I think we have to get very comfortable with those very difficult emotions before we can
yeah.
feel comfortable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it's very common, isn't it, to avoid those feelings. They don't feel
Yeah.
nice. So we
No.
bury them, we busy ourselves, we become very busy as individuals because actually I don't want to deal with what's going on underneath. And we know that if you bury it for too long, it will come back and bite you on the arse at some point.
Yeah. When
Probably
you're
with
least expecting it, I
say
can
when you
tell you
and you
that.
definitely don't want it to either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I was just thinking as you were talking then, is we know, we were just talking then about being able to feel those big feelings and all that kind of stuff is how do you look after yourself during that process? Because that's really important as a parent, isn't it? But we're not always very good at it.
It is. And I think often we've had sort of these sort of half baked things thrown at us, like have a bubble bath or
Yes.
something like that. Look at the face when I said that.
No, I'm
Oh,
just doing a talk about parenting and about kind of almost like this toxic self-care advice.
oh, it's awful, isn't
Have a
it?
bubble bath or you just need to have a rest or, when they're out, have a rest. And I was like, a rest? You wouldn't even touch the
Yeah.
sides.
Um, yeah, it's difficult. I think there's things that have kept me going, I would say, sort of, and it is a very generic one. So sorry if it sounds toxic, but it is exercise for me has been really helpful. So I was someone who hated PE at school, and I was always very, very sneering as an adult of people going to the gym. I was always like, what are they doing? Actually, um, when I couldn't move around an awful lot because I was stuck at home, and I felt like I was mentally quite weak from what had been our
Yes.
experiences. There was something about becoming physically stronger
Yeah.
that made me feel mentally stronger.
Yeah.
I don't, of course it might not, work it like that, but it gave me something psychologically that, right, if I can lift that weight,
Yeah. Yeah.
even when, just like I said, we are often quite helpless and uncertain in this parenting experience. It gave me something. And also it's quite good in a physical sense to have that kind of feedback anyway to our bodies. It
Absolutely.
is mentally quite good for us. And
Yeah.
then as years have gone on, I do quite a lot of sort of somatic work.
Okay.
So I do a lot of sort of breathing and sort of trying to get a bit more in tune to my own body. Found that really helpful, particularly when times are difficult. You know, you get that awful email on a 5 o'clock on a Friday. You
Yeah.
know, I'll go and push my hands against the wall for a minute and just, you know, get some of that feedback from myself and a bit of that breath work, because we are often very traumatized ourselves from these experiences, and we often have a survival or protectiveness in ourselves where we are jumping to fight or flight. You
Yeah.
know, these are survival.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so being able to start sort of breathing and get more in tune with our body, it just also gives our body another place to go in those times. You know, we're not necessarily then always going to go to fight or flight. We might actually be able to kind of reset ourselves. It's not to suppress what's going on or to pretend it's not happening, but it's just to give us something to kind of help ourselves in that. Because
Yeah.
I've been very, very ill at times. I'm not going to, you know, sugarcoat it. I've had very, very difficult physical symptoms as a result of stress, and my body has, I'm obviously very, very good at coping, too good at coping, and it will manifest itself physically for me. So I've had to, it's a
Yeah.
full, you know, forced hand to do this stuff. It's not come from a sort of, you know, woo woo, indulgent, you know, whatever. It's
No.
literally my body has gone at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. And it really interests me, I think, because I mean, I've probably always been a bit kind of autoimmune, but after
Yeah.
having a huge breakdown with my son and what was going on, well, with my son, I changed that with the system around my
Yeah. Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
The diagnoses then came very, very quickly with all the autoimmune stuff, and I swear that was stress responses and all that kind of stuff. And like you talked about with the movement side of things, I'd never thought about it actually, and I talk a lot about movement and from an OT perspective, and you know how great that is for us and any kind of movement, because what happens is when we get very anxious or scared by something is actually we become very static, we stop, and actually we're releasing all these hormones that are getting us ready to fight or flight, and they stay within our body, and actually we need the movement to be able to kind of work through those hormones that have been released. And I talk about even just the smallest movement, even if it's just around your garden a couple of times, just don't stop moving,
Yeah.
because I think it's very easy to do that. But I was really interested when you said, actually, I might have felt more fragile in my mind, but by making my body stronger helped. I'd never thought
Yeah.
about it in that way, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of, you know, when I literally couldn't do anything at that time
Yeah,
in terms of sort of helping my child, or that's how it felt psychologically, you know, pushing myself to do something in a gym class. I
yeah,
felt like I'd done something when the world was very,
yeah,
very
yeah,
uncertain and
yeah,
destabilizing.
yeah.
So,
And things like weight training, like you're talking about, I mean, I can get really OT and I get quite excited then, but you know, there's loads and loads of proprioception in that, which we know
yeah,
is really great for calming that central nervous system. You know, if you've got trauma related stuff, all that kind of stuff is going to help bring those stress levels down and that stress response down through that proprioception. And,
yeah.
weight training is often a really good thing. And then also, maybe women, I'm not going to assume what age you are, Eliza, but for me, at a
No,
certain
kind of
age,
doing it fine. Yes, I am at that age. It's even more important to do this stuff.
we need to get our weight training in and our strength training in as well,
Yeah,
which
and
helps
I
as
don't know
well.
if you do this with, if this comes under OT, but another thing that's really helpful is even when you're really stressed, do you do stuff like orientation to the space? Is that something you would do?
Yeah, so
Sort of.
kind of bringing you into the now, do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think even that, it's a really simple thing, isn't it? But just to sit there, look at what is around you, see where the exit is. Those are things that can just bring you back into that moment.
Yeah, and I think what happens often is because I think we're often in flight or flight or quite easily tripped into that, is that we're constantly looking 5, 6, 7 steps ahead.
Yeah,
Am I safe? Am I safe is what we're really doing. But we're kind of thinking, what do I need to do and where do I need to go and how do I need to get them there? But actually, yes, stopping and bringing you back into the moment, because I'm notorious for that. Don't spend a lot of time in the moment. I'm
it's very
always
difficult to. Yeah,
far forward. And I think with the stresses that we have around navigating systems, that it
mm,
kind of comes with that. But yeah, trying to be in the moment is really can help in those moments
yeah,
just to take the edge off things. And
yeah.
it's never a quick answer. It's never a kind of a just do this and it'll all be fine. But it can sometimes just take the edge off in those
Yeah,
moments.
and I think also, I think, you know, we kind of, I used to get it muddled up and think, well, is that trying to just say be calm, which is really toxic in itself in a stressful situation. It's not. It's more to kind of bring ourselves down, but also to be able to kind of go through the different states of the day, being annoyed, because we are all through the day. We're going to get annoyed about something. We might have a cry. We might be happy, but what it does is it once we bring that stuff into doing it more regularly, it gets us back into that regular state quicker. So
Yes.
rather than sort of getting upset or very upset, annoyed at an email and being like that all day, we might have that in that moment, but be able to come back and reset a lot
Yeah, the
quicker.
recovery.
The recovery, yeah.
Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
Liza, thank you. I think I could keep talking to you. Thank you ever so much for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on. It's lovely to talk about what's kind of your experiences and what's been behind the books and the drawings and everything else. What have you got going on at the moment? Obviously, I'm going to put all of Eliza's contact details where you can find her, all the loads of books that she's now written as well. I will put all those in the show notes for everybody. But is there anything kind of happening for you at the moment?
Yeah, so my book, Could Try Harder, is out in May. So that's about my teenage years. So it's this kind of follow up to Thumbsucker, if you like. And that's about sort of exploring my own secondary school experiences and what kind of that sort of being on that precipice of adulthood and how that kind of impacted me. That pressure of being on the precipice of adulthood, really.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will kind of help, well, young adults, but also parents of young adults to kind of see that pressure can kind of what the impact of that pressure is like.
Yeah, and it's hard, that transition, isn't it? That kind of
Really hard.
change, that transition into adulthood. And
I
as a
just didn't feel
parent,
ready for it either. I remember sort of, and that's through the book, I kind of was like, I don't feel ready for this. But
yeah,
apparently we're meant to be thinking about this and this and this, and
yeah,
I'm still
yeah,
at home playing with my Barbies secretly.
yeah. And hard for parents too, I think, isn't it? I think when our kids have been very vulnerable,
Mm.
is knowing how and when to let that go. And even just thinking about my son, and he was wanting to stay in the house by himself, and I was, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. And then he eventually said to me, "But you let my brother do it at the same age, so why not me?" He was really wanting the extra, and it was me going, "No, no, no, not yet, not yet, not yet." And it's
Yeah.
really hard, that. It'd be really interesting to read that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's out May the 14th. So I've got an in-person book launch in a bookshop in London, but I've also got an online one in June. So, it's a bit
Amazing.
more accessible for people. So, yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for coming on, Eliza. I really appreciate it.
thanks.
I've learnt a lot since starting my own podcast, mostly by getting things wrong first. There was even a point where I nearly didn't have a podcast at all until, like most things in my life, I found a way to make it fit my brain and my life. Turns out the typical podcasting advice doesn't fit everyone. Who knew? That's exactly why I created the Untypical Podcaster Lab. It's for people who know they want to start a podcast, but need a way that works for them, not somebody else. I'll guide you from your first brainwave to your first published episode, one step at a time, in just 2 weeks. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, you'll find all the details in the show notes. I'd absolutely love to help you get your podcast out into the world. Take care, and I'll see you soon.